Every evening for the past 6 months, Kenji has spent exactly 3 minutes writing in a small notebook before bed. Just 3 minutes. No grand journaling sessions, no elaborate reflection rituals, simply 3 minutes of capturing thoughts on paper. What started as an almost trivial practice has fundamentally altered how his brain processes experience, memory, and identity. His colleagues notice he's become more thoughtful, his relationships have deepened, and he approaches challenges with greater clarity. But Kenji didn't set out to transform himself. He simply engaged with what neuroscientists now understand as the most powerful force for human change: the accumulation of microscopic alterations in neural pathways. This is the paradox of neuroplasticity. The smallest actions, repeated consistently, create the most profound transformations. While our culture celebrates dramatic change narratives, the sudden epiphany, the radical life overhaul, the transformational weekend retreat, the actual science of brain change reveals something far more subtle and powerful. Your brain is being rewired right now, in this moment, by habits so small you barely notice them. The question isn't whether your habits are changing your brain. They are, continuously and inevitably. The question is whether you're conscious enough to direct that process intentionally. To understand how tiny habits reshape who we become, we must first examine the philosophical nature of identity itself. Western culture tends to conceive of identity as a fixed essence, a core self that remains constant while circumstances change. But this view conflicts with both neuroscientific evidence and philosophical traditions that understand identity as an emergent process rather than a static entity. Buddhist philosophy has long described the self as pratitya samutpada, dependent origination, meaning our sense of self arises from countless interdependent conditions rather than existing independently. Modern neuroscience confirms this insight. What we experience as self emerges from the dynamic interaction of neural networks that are constantly being modified by experience. This has profound implications for understanding habit formation. When philosophers like Aristotle wrote about character as the result of repeated actions, they weren't describing external behaviors but internal neurological restructuring. Each time you perform an action, you literally alter the physical structure of your brain, making that action more likely in the future while simultaneously shifting the neural foundations of your identity. Consider Fatima, a software engineer who began taking 5-minute walking breaks every hour. This seemingly minor habit didn't just improve her physical health, it rewired her brain's relationship to work, attention, and problem solving. The regular interruption of focused work created new neural pathways that enhanced creativity while reducing the stress response patterns that had previously defined her professional identity. She became, quite literally, a different person through the accumulation of 5-minute walks. Our brains don't develop habits in isolation but within cultural contexts that profoundly shape which neural pathways strengthen and which atrophy. Different cultures cultivate different default patterns of attention, emotion regulation, and behavior through the habits they normalize and reward. Japanese concepts like kaizen, continuous improvement through small changes, reflect deep cultural understanding of how incremental modifications create profound transformation. When Hiroshi practices his morning radio exercises with millions of other Japanese citizens, he's not just maintaining physical health but participating in a cultural practice that reinforces neural patterns of discipline, community consciousness, and long-term thinking. Contrast this with American cultural habits that often emphasize dramatic, immediate results. The difference isn't just behavioral, it's neurological. Brains developed within Kaizen-oriented cultures show different patterns of anterior cingulate cortex activity, the region associated with sustained attention and gradual improvement. Meanwhile, brains shaped by instant gratification cultural patterns show heightened activity in reward-seeking circuits that respond to immediate stimulation. This reveals something crucial. Your cultural environment is continuously shaping your brain through the habits it makes normal, easy, or socially rewarded. The tiny habits that seem personally chosen often reflect larger cultural programming that operates below conscious awareness. Recent advances in neuroscientific research reveal the precise mechanisms through which tiny habits create profound brain changes. The process operates through what scientists call synaptic plasticity, the strengthening and weakening of connections between neurons based on usage patterns. Every time you repeat an action, you increase the efficiency of the neural pathway associated with that behavior. This happens at the cellular level through the production of proteins that strengthen synaptic connections and the myelination of frequently used neural circuits. Over time, these microscopic changes accumulate into macroscopic alterations in brain structure and function. Dr. Alvaro Pascual Leone's research demonstrates that mental rehearsal alone, simply imagining performing an action, creates measurable changes in brain structure. This means that tiny mental habits, like briefly visualizing success before challenging tasks, physically rewire neural networks associated with confidence and performance. The philosophical implication is staggering. Your thoughts are not separate from your physical reality but continuously sculpt the biological foundation of your consciousness. When Marina began spending 2 minutes each morning setting intentions for the day, she wasn't engaging in positive thinking but in literal brain sculpting that altered her default patterns of attention and decision-making. Different cultures have evolved sophisticated systems for organizing habit formation that reflect deep wisdom about human psychology and social organization. These cultural approaches to habits reveal different philosophies about change, identity, and human potential. Scandinavian concepts of lagom, balance and moderation, influence how habits are approached and sustained. Swedish research on habit formation shows that individuals from lagom-oriented cultures are more successful at maintaining small, consistent changes over time compared to cultures that emphasize dramatic transformation. This isn't about cultural superiority but about different neurological architectures created by cultural habit patterns. Indigenous cultures often integrate habit formation with seasonal cycles and community rhythms. Native American traditions like daily sunrise acknowledgement create habits that align individual neural patterns with natural and social cycles. This integration of personal habits with larger rhythms creates more robust and sustainable change patterns compared to isolated individual habit formation. The neuroscientific insight is that habits formed within supportive cultural frameworks create stronger and more enduring neural changes because they activate additional brain networks associated with social connection, meaning-making, and identity coherence. The most profound aspect of brain rewiring through tiny habits lies in what scientists call cross-domain transfer, changes in one area of functioning that create improvements in seemingly unrelated areas. This occurs because habits don't just strengthen specific behavioral circuits but alter fundamental neural architecture that influences multiple cognitive and emotional systems. When Diego began practicing 3 minutes of mindful breathing each morning, the changes extended far beyond stress reduction. The sustained attention required for breath awareness strengthened his prefrontal cortex, improving decision-making in professional contexts. The emotional regulation developed through mindfulness practice enhanced his relationships. The consistency required to maintain the practice increased his overall self-efficacy and confidence. This compound effect explains why small habits often create disproportionately large life changes. They don't just modify specific behaviors, they alter the neural infrastructure that supports all behavior, creating what psychologists call keystone habit effects that trigger positive changes across multiple life domains. The cultural dimension becomes crucial here. Societies that understand and harness compound effects create more effective habit architectures. Traditional Chinese medicine's emphasis on daily practices that balance multiple bodily systems reflects sophisticated understanding of how small, consistent actions create systemic improvements in physical and mental functioning. Perhaps the most fascinating aspect of habit-based brain rewiring is how it creates feedback loops between behavior and identity. Each tiny habit doesn't just change what you do, it changes who you believe yourself to be, which in turn influences what actions feel natural and possible. This process operates through what neuroscientists call self-concept plasticity, the brain's tendency to update identity-related neural networks based on behavioral evidence. When you consistently perform small actions aligned with a desired identity, your brain begins categorizing you as the kind of person who does these things, making related behaviors feel more natural and automatic. Consider Priya, who began making her bed immediately upon waking each day. This 2-minute habit gradually shifted her self-concept from someone who struggles with organization to someone who creates order and follows through on commitments. This identity shift made other organizational behaviors, filing documents, maintaining schedules, completing projects, feel more aligned with who she was becoming rather than effortful attempts to be someone different. Cultural traditions that emphasize identity-habit alignment create more sustainable change processes. Confucian self-cultivation practices, Islamic daily prayers, and monastic routines all operate through this principle of using consistent small actions to gradually reshape identity at the neural level. Modern culture often creates resistance to the tiny habit approach through several deeply embedded beliefs that conflict with how brain change actually occurs. The cultural narrative of dramatic transformation, instant results, and heroic effort creates neural patterns that make sustained small changes feel insufficient or meaningless. This cultural programming operates through what psychologists call magnitude bias, the tendency to overvalue large, immediate changes while undervaluing small, consistent ones. Marketing messages, entertainment narratives, and social media content all reinforce neural patterns that respond to dramatic stimulation while becoming habituated to gradual improvement. The neuroscientific reality contradicts these cultural patterns. Research consistently shows that dramatic changes activate stress response systems that make long-term maintenance difficult, while tiny changes operate below the brain's resistance threshold, allowing new neural pathways to strengthen without triggering defensive reactions. Breaking through cultural resistance requires what I call stealth neuroplasticity, using the brain's natural change mechanisms while bypassing culturally programmed expectations about what meaningful change should look like. The most effective approach to brain rewiring through tiny habits integrates neuroscientific principles with cultural wisdom about sustainable change. This requires understanding both universal mechanisms of neuroplasticity and culture-specific factors that support or hinder habit formation. Universal principles include starting smaller than feels meaningful, linking new habits to existing routines, focusing on consistency over intensity, and celebrating micro-successes to reinforce positive neural patterns. These principles work because they align with how the brain naturally learns and adapts. Cultural customization involves adapting these principles to your specific cultural context and values. If your culture emphasizes community, design habits that create social connection. If your background values intellectual development, choose habits that engage curiosity and learning. If your tradition emphasizes spiritual growth, integrate contemplative elements into mundane practices. The key insight is that habits most effectively rewire your brain when they feel congruent with your cultural identity while gradually expanding what that identity includes. Understanding brain rewiring through tiny habits reveals something profound about human nature. We are not fixed entities but continuous processes of becoming. Each moment offers opportunities to influence the direction of that becoming through conscious engagement with the mechanisms of neuroplasticity. This perspective aligns with philosophical traditions that emphasize process over product, becoming over being. Ancient Greek concepts of eudaimonia, flourishing through the expression of potential, describe the same phenomenon that neuroscience now measures: the gradual development of neural architecture that supports greater wisdom, capability, and well-being. The practical implication is both humbling and empowering. Humbling because it reveals how much of what we consider our permanent personality represents neural patterns that could be different if we had different habits. Empowering because it demonstrates that meaningful change remains possible at any stage of life through patient engagement with small, consistent actions. Your brain is being sculpted right now by the habits you're performing today. The person you become tomorrow emerges from the neural pathways you're strengthening through today's tiny choices. This isn't metaphor. It's measurable biological reality happening in real time within your skull. The science of brain rewiring through tiny habits offers a pathway for conscious participation in your own development. Rather than hoping for dramatic transformation or accepting current limitations as permanent, you can engage with the precise mechanisms through which your brain adapts and evolves. Start by identifying one tiny habit that aligns with who you want to become. Make it so small it feels almost trivial. 2 minutes of reading, 30 seconds of gratitude, 1 push-up, a single mindful breath. The size isn't important, the consistency is everything. Understand that you're not just changing a behavior but literally rewiring neural architecture that influences your entire experience of being human. Each repetition strengthens pathways that make positive actions more automatic while weakening patterns that no longer serve your growth. Pay attention to how small changes compound over time. Notice shifts in identity, capability, and possibility that emerge from accumulated microscopic improvements. Document the journey not just through external metrics but through awareness of internal transformation. Remember that this process operates within cultural contexts that can support or hinder your efforts. Design your habit environment to align with your cultural strengths while gently challenging limitations that no longer serve your development. The brain you have today reflects the habits you practiced yesterday. The brain you'll have tomorrow is being shaped by the tiny choices you make today. This understanding transforms every moment into an opportunity for conscious evolution rather than unconscious repetition. Your identity isn't fixed, it's continuously emerging from the neural patterns you strengthen through repeated action. The most profound transformations begin with changes so small they seem insignificant, yet accumulate into fundamental alterations in who you are and what you're capable of becoming. If this exploration of neuroplasticity and habit formation resonated with you, subscribe for more insights into how small changes create profound transformations, and share in the comments what tiny habit you're considering starting. Understanding these mechanisms empowers us to participate consciously in our own development rather than hoping for change to happen to us.